You hear it before you see it. A low, mechanical growl rolling across the frozen landscape. Then the ground begins to tremble. Not violently, just enough to remind you that something enormous is moving through the snow. Tonight, you're not watching history unfold. You're trapped inside it. Not as a famous general. Not as the commander giving orders from miles behind the front. You're one of 5 men sealed inside nearly 70 tons of German steel. A Tiger tank. For decades, it's been remembered as one of the most feared weapons of the Second World War. A machine capable of destroying enemy tanks from remarkable distances. A symbol of German engineering. A battlefield legend. But legends have a habit of leaving things out. Because while the Tiger terrified the men facing it, the men inside it often feared something else entirely. The freezing cold, the constant breakdowns, the deafening noise, the fumes, the fires, and the terrifying knowledge that one lucky shell could transform the world's most powerful tank into a steel coffin. Before we climb inside, if you enjoy thoughtful, immersive stories from history, consider subscribing. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Now, turn down the lights. Get comfortable. Take one slow breath. Because in just a few moments, the hatch is going to slam shut above your head. And once it does, there's no standing up, no stretching your legs, no fresh air, no easy way out. Only steel, diesel, for exhausted strangers, and an endless frozen battlefield stretching somewhere beyond the armor. Welcome to the Eastern Front. The year is 1943, and whether this machine becomes your greatest protection or your tomb is no longer entirely up to you. Congratulations. You've survived training. At least, that's what your paperwork says. Reality is a little different. Because today marks your first day on the Eastern Front. And if the veterans are to be believed, this is where survival stops depending on skill and starts depending on luck. The truck grinds to a halt. No one tells you to get out. They don't have to. The men around you climb down without a word, and you follow. The moment your boots touch the ground, the cold punches straight through them. Not the kind of cold that makes you shiver. The kind that makes you question whether your feet still exist. The air burns your lungs. Every breath feels sharp enough to cut. You instinctively pull your coat tighter, but it makes almost no difference. The Eastern Front doesn't care how many layers you're wearing. It finds every gap, every loose button, every exposed fingertip. Soon enough, it owns them. You look around. This isn't the Europe you imagined. There's almost nothing left standing. A few shattered walls, roofless houses, burned-out barns collapsing beneath heavy snow. Trees stand blackened against the pale sky, stripped of branches by months of shell fire. Even the roads have disappeared. They're buried beneath frozen mud, churned snow, and countless tank tracks. You couldn't tell where one village ends and another begins. The entire landscape has been flattened into one endless battlefield. The smell surprises you. You expected clean winter air. Instead, it's diesel fuel, burned oil, wood smoke, wet wool, and something else. Something faint, something sweet. You don't ask what it is. The older soldiers never do. They already know. Someone points toward a massive shape sitting in what used to be the village square. At first, it barely looks like a tank. It looks like a building. A squat block of steel covered in frost and mud. Snow clings to its hull. Ice hangs from the tracks. The famous Tiger, the machine newspapers back home describe as nearly unstoppable. Standing beside it, you understand why. It's enormous. Its thick armor seems capable of surviving anything. Its long 88mm gun stretches forward like the barrel of a battleship. Even motionless, it feels intimidating, as though the machine itself is watching you. Then one of the crew casually kicks the track. A chunk of frozen mud falls away. You'll hate it soon enough. It's the first sentence anyone has spoken to you all morning. The commander walks over. He's younger than you expected. Maybe 30, maybe a little older. War has a way of making age difficult to judge. His face is weathered. His eyes are permanently bloodshot. Not from alcohol. From exhaustion. He gives you a quick glance. No handshake. No welcome speech. No questions about where you're from. Just a nod toward the tank. That's introduction enough. The rest of the crew isn't much different. The gunner barely acknowledges your existence. Someone quietly tells you he hasn't been the same since Kursk. No one asks what happened there. No one needs to. The loader looks impossibly young. He keeps chewing on something frozen. Bread perhaps. Or maybe simply habit. The driver still tries to joke. Barely. His last joke, someone tells you, was that frostbite saves money on boot repairs. No one laughed. Out here, humor doesn't disappear. It simply freezes. Then comes your first lesson. Not about firing the gun. Not about Soviet tanks. Not about tactics. The commander simply points at the Tiger. Keep it running. At first, that sounds easy. Until you realize he isn't talking about the engine. He's talking about everything. Tracks, transmission, fuel, oil, ammunition, hydraulics, the radio, the optics, every moving part. Because out here, the enemy isn't the only thing trying to destroy your tank. The weather is. Mud is. Ice is. Distance is. Sometimes, the machine defeats itself before the Soviets ever have the chance. You spend the afternoon loading ammunition. Each shell is astonishingly heavy, cold enough to stick briefly to your bare skin. You lost your gloves days ago during the journey east. There weren't any replacements. So you lift shell after shell with cracked hands already split open by the freezing air. No one notices the blood. Everyone else's hands look exactly the same. Night arrives without ceremony. There isn't much of a sunset. The gray sky simply becomes black. Someone hands you a tin cup. Inside, lukewarm coffee, or something pretending to be coffee. You drink it anyway. It tastes bitter, metallic, but warm. For a moment, that's enough. The crew says almost nothing. No one talks about tomorrow's mission. Not because they're confident, because speaking about it somehow makes it feel closer. Instead, each man quietly checks his equipment one last time. A habit repeated so often it no longer requires thought. Eventually, the commander climbs into the tank. One by one, the others follow. You take one final look across the frozen landscape. The wind whistles through the ruins. Far away, artillery flashes briefly against the horizon. The battle never truly sleeps. Neither will you. You grab the edge of the hatch. Pull yourself upward. Then lower your body into the darkness below. The steel closes around you. The hatch slams shut overhead. And with that single metallic clang, your world suddenly becomes much smaller. Because tomorrow, you won't simply be fighting on the Eastern Front. You'll be living inside one of the most famous tanks ever built. And before long, you'll begin wondering whether the enemy outside is really more dangerous than the machine surrounding you. The first thing you notice isn't the gun. It isn't the armor. It isn't the engine. It's the lack of space. From the outside, the Tiger looks enormous. A fortress on tracks. A machine that seems capable of swallowing an entire squad of soldiers. But the moment you climb inside, that illusion disappears. Every inch has already been claimed. By machinery, by ammunition, by fuel, by 4 other men. There's barely enough room left for you. The hatch slams shut. Darkness follows. Only thin slivers of daylight squeeze through the periscopes. Your entire world shrinks to a steel box no wider than a small room. You instinctively try to stand. Your helmet strikes the turret roof with a loud metallic crack. The crew doesn't even look up. Everyone does it their first time. Some continue doing it for months. You carefully lower yourself into your position. There are no comfortable seats. No padded benches. No luxury of stretching your legs. You twist your knees sideways. Lean your shoulder against cold steel. Then realize you've wedged yourself against a rack of live ammunition. You move again. Now you're bumping into the gearbox. Move once more. Someone else's elbow. Inside the Tiger, every movement belongs to someone else. Then, the smell arrives. Not all at once. It builds. Diesel fuel, burned oil, hot steel, leather that's absorbed years of sweat. damp wool uniforms that never completely dry, gunpowder residue, grease, and beneath it all, the unmistakable scent of 5 exhausted men sharing the same air day after day. It's overwhelming. You try not to react. The veterans notice anyway. One of them smirks. You'll stop smelling it in a week. He's probably right. Not because it improves, because your brain simply gives up trying to fight it. Every surface inside the tank seems determined to injure you. Sharp corners, steel brackets, heavy levers, bolts protruding from walls. Even standing still requires concentration. Hit one unexpected bump, and your head slams into the turret ring. Brace yourself the wrong way, and your ribs find the recoil guard. Drop a shell, and everyone inside suddenly has the same problem. Nothing is forgiving. Nothing is soft. The Tiger wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed for war. Comfort never entered the conversation. The commander occupies the highest position. From there, he peers through narrow vision blocks. The gunner sits beside the massive breech of the famous 88mm cannon. The loader works constantly, lifting shells that way, nearly 20 kilograms each. The driver stares through a tiny viewing port at the frozen world ahead. You quickly realize something. Nobody has enough room to do their job properly. Everyone is constantly borrowing space from everyone else. The Tiger isn't operated by 5 individuals. It's operated by 5 people trying not to collide. Then the engine starts. The sound doesn't simply fill the compartment. It attacks it. The entire tank begins vibrating. Your seat vibrates. The floor vibrates. Your teeth vibrate. The roar is so overwhelming that conversation becomes almost impossible. You try asking the loader a simple question. He doesn't answer. Not because he's ignoring you. He genuinely can't hear you. So you lean closer. Repeat yourself. Still nothing. Finally, someone taps your shoulder and points toward the commander. Inside a Tiger, words are a luxury. Most communication happens through gestures. A shove, a nod, a hand signal, or simply knowing what comes next. Hours pass. The vibration never stops. At first, it's impossible to ignore. Then something stranger happens. You stop hearing it. Instead, you notice the headache, a dull pressure behind your eyes. Your jaw aches from unconsciously clenching your teeth. Your back begins hurting from muscles constantly trying to stabilize your body against every movement of the tank. The engine has become background noise. Your body has become the instrument absorbing it. Temperature is another enemy. If the engine has been running for hours, the compartment becomes an oven. Heat radiates from every steel surface. Sweat soaks through your uniform. The air grows thick. Breathing becomes work. Then, the engine stops. Within minutes, the warmth disappears. The steel begins stealing heat from your body. Condensation forms on the walls. Your breath hangs in the air. By morning, frost has crept across the interior. The same metal that roasted you yesterday is trying to freeze you today. There are no windows, only narrow vision slits. The battlefield exists as fragments. A tree, a ruined farmhouse, smoke drifting across a field. You never see the whole picture, only tiny pieces. The commander sees more than anyone else, which means everyone else's survival depends on what he notices, or fails to notice. Food arrives whenever it can, usually cold, usually stale. You balance a tin of meat on top of the gun breech because there's nowhere else to put it. Someone accidentally spills grease into it. No one throws it away. Calories are calories. You eat with dirty hands. Hands covered in oil, carbon, gunpowder. No clean water. No soap. No chance to wash before the next mission. Hygiene stopped being important hundreds of kilometers ago. Sleep, if you can call it that, comes in pieces. 10 minutes. 20 if you're lucky. Always sitting upright. Always wearing your helmet. Always ready to wake at the first shouted order. You don't dream anymore. Your body no longer remembers how. Instead, you drift in and out of exhaustion while the engine hums beneath you like some enormous mechanical heartbeat. From the outside, the Tiger looks unstoppable. a masterpiece of engineering, a symbol of power. But from the inside, it feels different. It feels less like climbing into history, and more like climbing inside a machine that demands something from you every single minute you're alive. Your attention, your strength, your sleep, your hearing, your health. Eventually, perhaps even your life. Because tomorrow, the hatch will stay closed. The engine will roar. And for the first time, this steel prison won't be standing still. It'll be driving toward the enemy. Morning arrives. Though calling it morning feels generous. The sky is the same dull gray it was yesterday. The same color it was last week. The same color it'll probably be tomorrow. Out here, the sun doesn't rise. It merely brightens the battlefield enough for people to start killing each other again. The commander glances through his periscope. No speech. No motivational words. Just one sentence. Start her up. The driver nods. Reaches forward. Twists the ignition. For a brief second, nothing happens. Then the Maybach engine explodes to life beneath your feet. The entire tank shudders violently. Steel plates rattle. Loose tools clatter against the floor. The massive engine roars with a force that seems almost alive. You don't just hear it. You feel it. Through your boots, your spine, your chest, your teeth. The tiger doesn't simply wake up. It growls. Almost instantly, conversation becomes impossible. The commander points. The driver nods. The loader gives a thumbs up. Everyone communicates through movements they've repeated hundreds of times before. You imitate them as best you can, trying not to look like the newest man in the tank, trying not to be the reason something goes wrong. The transmission groans. The tracks bite into the frozen earth. Slowly, the 70-ton machine begins to move. From inside, it doesn't feel smooth. Every rut in the road sends a violent jolt through the hull. Every frozen tree root feels like driving over a boulder. You slam your shoulder against the steel wall, then your helmet against the turret ring. No one reacts. The veterans have already learned to brace before every impact. You haven't. Not yet. Outside, the world slides past in narrow slices. A ruined farmhouse. A line of shattered trees. Snow whipped across abandoned fields. You can't see the battlefield. Only fragments of it. The periscopes offer tiny windows into a much larger world. It's like trying to understand an entire storm by looking through a keyhole. The commander sees the most. Everyone else trusts him. They have to. Hours pass. The tank crawls eastward. The engine never stops roaring. The vibration never fades. Eventually, you stop noticing the shaking. Your body simply accepts it. The constant rattling becomes the new definition of silence. Until the commander suddenly raises his fist. Everyone freezes. The driver eases off the throttle. The tiger rolls to a halt. Nobody speaks. You hear something. Not inside the tank. Outside. A distant whistle. Then another. Someone pounds twice on the turret wall. The signal. Incoming artillery. A heartbeat later. The ground erupts. The first shell lands somewhere ahead. The explosion shakes the entire tank. Snow rains down across the hull. Another impact. Closer. Steel groans around you. The commander calmly scans through his optics. He isn't looking at the explosions. He's looking for what comes after them. Because artillery rarely arrives alone. Then, the radio crackles. Broken words. Fragments. Coordinates. Warnings. The static almost drowns them out. You catch only one phrase. Soviet armor. Every man inside the tank immediately becomes sharper. The loader reaches for another shell. The gunner adjusts his sights. The driver grips the controls tighter. No panic. Just routine. Which somehow feels even more unsettling. You expected fear to look dramatic. Shaking hands. Wide eyes. Panic. Instead, it looks like discipline. The commander speaks in the same calm voice he used this morning. The gunner breathes steadily. The loader works with practiced precision. Only tiny details betray what's happening. A clenched jaw. A tighter grip. Someone unconsciously licking dry lips. These men aren't fearless. They're simply too experienced to waste energy showing it. The tiger begins moving again. Slower this time. More cautiously. Every open field could hide an anti-tank gun. Every patch of snow might conceal a mine. Every tree line could be filled with Soviet infantry waiting for the perfect shot. The Tiger's armor is thick, but everyone inside understands something the propaganda posters never mention. Armor has limits. Tracks break. Engines fail. Fuel runs out. And a tank that can't move is no longer a weapon. It's a target. Without warning, the driver slams the brakes. Everyone lurches forward. A muffled metallic sound echoes beneath the hull. The commander curses quietly. Not a mine. Frozen ground. The left track has climbed onto buried rubble. For several tense seconds, the Tiger struggles for grip. The engine roars louder. Tracks spin. Snow sprays into the air. The tank barely moves. Inside, no one breathes. Because getting stuck on the Eastern Front is more than inconvenient. It can be fatal. Fortunately, the tracks finally bite. The enormous machine lurches free. Only then does the crew relax. Slightly, you realize something. The enemy hasn't even fired at you yet. And already, the tank has nearly defeated itself. That's the hidden truth about the Tiger. It wasn't only fighting Soviet soldiers. It was fighting Russian winters. Mud. Mechanical failures. Fuel shortages. Bridges too weak to carry its weight. Roads that barely deserve the name. Sometimes, the battlefield itself was the deadliest opponent. As dusk approaches, the commander finally orders a halt. The engine falls silent. Your ears continue ringing anyway. You hadn't realized how loud the tank truly was until the noise disappeared. For the first time all day, you hear the wind again. Someone exhales. Another man rubs life back into stiff fingers. No one celebrates surviving another mission. Because everyone knows. Tomorrow they'll climb back inside. And the next day. And the day after that. Until luck finally runs out. The Tiger may have been one of the most feared tanks of the war. But for the men sealed inside it, every kilometer forward carried the same unsettling question. Would today be the day the armor held? Or the day it became your coffin? Long before you ever climbed inside a Tiger, you'd already heard the stories. Some claimed a single Tiger could destroy an entire column of enemy tanks. Others swore Soviet shells simply bounced harmlessly off its armor. Photographs showed enormous machines rolling confidently across open fields, while newspapers called them unstoppable. By the time you reached the Eastern Front, the Tiger had already become more than a tank. It had become a legend, and legends have a dangerous habit of leaving out the uncomfortable parts. On paper, the Tiger deserved its reputation. Its frontal armor measured up to 100 millimeters thick, enough to withstand many Allied anti-tank guns at long range during much of the war. Its powerful 88mm KWK-36 cannon could knock out enemy armor from distances where many opposing tanks struggled to reply effectively. Against earlier Soviet designs, that combination was terrifying. Crews who spotted a Tiger often knew they were already at a disadvantage. Not because victory was impossible, but because getting close enough to fight back was often the hardest part. For the men inside, that reputation became its own kind of armor, until reality reminded everyone that steel has limits. The commander taps the inside of the hull. People think this makes us safe. His gloved knuckles strike the armor with a dull metallic thud. It doesn't. At first, you don't understand. How could something this heavily armored not be safe? Then he points downward. The tracks. A tank doesn't need to be destroyed to become useless. It only needs to stop moving. A broken track, a damaged drive sprocket, a failed transmission. Any one of those could leave nearly 70 tons of steel stranded in the middle of an open battlefield. And once that happened, the Tiger's greatest strength became its greatest weakness. It couldn't run. It couldn't hide. And towing one away under enemy fire was almost impossible. Weight was both the Tiger's greatest advantage and its constant curse. Every bridge became a question. Would it hold? Many wouldn't. Crews often had to search for alternate crossings or carefully ford rivers Because collapsing a bridge beneath 70 tons of steel meant abandoning the vehicle altogether. Even ordinary roads became dangerous. Soft ground swallowed the tracks. Spring thaw transformed entire fields into oceans of mud. Russian winters froze everything solid. Then spring returned, and the earth fought back. The Germans even had a word for it. Rasputitsa, the season when roads stopped behaving like roads. Trucks disappeared axle deep. Artillery bogged down. Even the mighty Tiger found itself struggling against mud that seemed determined to consume it. Fuel created another problem. The Maybach engine demanded enormous amounts of it, far more than Germany could comfortably supply as the war dragged on. Every kilometer consumed precious fuel. Every unnecessary detour mattered. Sometimes tanks sat idle, not because they were damaged, because there simply wasn't enough fuel to move them. A Tiger without fuel wasn't a weapon. It was an expensive bunker, one the enemy could eventually surround. Then there were the breakdowns. The Tiger was an engineering masterpiece. It was also incredibly complicated. The suspension required constant attention. The transmission endured tremendous stress moving such immense weight. Final drives wore out. Engines overheated. Tracks required frequent maintenance. You quickly discover that every mission begins the same way. Not by loading ammunition, by checking what might have broken yesterday. The propaganda posters never mention this part. They don't show mechanics lying in freezing mud replacing damaged track links. They don't show exhausted crews tightening bolts with numb fingers. They don't show commanders staring anxiously at leaking gearboxes. Those moments aren't glorious, but they decide whether a Tiger reaches the battlefield at all. The commander tells you something you'll remember for years. The Soviets don't have to destroy the tank. They just have to make us stay still. It sounds almost ridiculous, until you begin noticing burned-out Tigers scattered across the countryside. Many aren't missing their turrets. Many haven't exploded. Some simply sit abandoned. Tracks broken. Engines silent. Crews gone. Sometimes evacuated. Sometimes captured. Sometimes they never made it out. You start paying closer attention. Every strange vibration. Every grinding sound. Every metallic clunk. The Tiger constantly speaks to its crew. Not with words. With noises. Ignore the wrong one, and tomorrow's mission may never happen. The driver almost seems to understand the machine better than people. He knows when to shift before the gearbox complains. He knows when the engine temperature is climbing before anyone checks the gauges. Sometimes he simply stops the tank, listens, and says quietly, "Something doesn't sound right." No one argues. Everyone climbs out, because experience has taught them something simple. Fixing a problem today is easier than surviving one tomorrow. Outside, the Tiger still inspires fear. Enemy soldiers see thick armor, a massive gun, an unstoppable silhouette on the horizon. Inside, you see something different. Hundreds of moving parts. Thousands of opportunities for failure. 5 exhausted men trying to keep all of them alive. The Tiger is powerful, perhaps one of the most formidable tanks of the Second World War. But every mile reminds you of an uncomfortable truth. The enemy isn't always waiting beyond the next hill. Sometimes, it's hidden beneath the engine deck. Sometimes, it's buried inside the transmission. And sometimes, it's simply the crushing weight of 70 tons trying to move across a continent that seems determined not to let it. The first time you see a Soviet tank, you expect a duel. 2 armored giants. One shot, then another. The stronger machine wins. That's how the newspapers describe tank warfare. That's how the propaganda films portray it. But the Eastern Front has little interest in dramatic showdowns. Out here, the battlefield belongs to whoever adapts first. And by 1943, the Red Army had learned something important. You don't have to outgun a Tiger. You just have to outthink it. The commander spots movement through his periscope. Tanks. Everyone inside immediately stiffens. The gunner swings the massive 88 toward the distant silhouettes. The loader already has a shell in his hands. Through your tiny vision slit, you catch only brief glimpses. dark shapes weaving between snow-covered ridges, never staying exposed for long. The Soviets aren't charging. They're hunting. Early in the war, many Soviet crews feared the Tiger. Some had watched shells bounce harmlessly from its thick frontal armor. Others had seen fellow tank crews destroyed long before they could return fire. But experience is a ruthless teacher. Eventually, they discovered something every hunter eventually learns. Every predator has blind spots. The Tiger's front was immensely strong. Its sides, far less so. Its rear, weaker still. The enormous tank couldn't pivot quickly. Its turret rotated far more slowly than many smaller Soviet tanks. If several enemy tanks attacked from different directions at once, the Tiger suddenly faced an impossible choice. Turn toward one threat and expose another. Destroy one attacker, while the second moved closer. Survive the first shot, only to receive another from somewhere you couldn't see. The battlefield had become a contest of angles rather than armor. The commander quietly mutters, "Watch the flanks." Not the front, the flanks. Because that's where experienced Soviet crews wanted to be. They rarely sought a head-on duel unless they had no alternative. Instead, they maneuvered, distracted, waited, sometimes sacrificing one vehicle so another could reach a better firing position. It was costly, but increasingly, it worked. Then came the infantry. At first glance, a lone soldier hardly seems threatening to a 70-ton tank, until he disappears. The Tiger's greatest weakness wasn't always another tank. Sometimes, it was a man you couldn't see, a soldier crawling through shell craters, using smoke, ruined buildings, snowbanks, anything that concealed his approach. The closer he got, the more dangerous he became. Molotov cocktails, explosive charges, anti-tank grenades, magnetic mines were available. Weapons that seemed almost insignificant compared to the Tiger's massive gun. Yet all of them shared one goal: get close enough. Because once an enemy reached the sides or rear, thick frontal armor meant very little. The commander never stopped scanning. Periscopes, tree lines, windows, ditches, anywhere a soldier might hide. You begin to understand something. Inside a Tiger, your greatest fear isn't always what you can see. It's what you can't. The radio crackles. Reports from another German crew. One Tiger disabled. Track destroyed. Crew under infantry attack. No further transmission. Silence follows. No one comments. No one asks whether they escaped. The answer is usually obvious. Then, your own driver suddenly brakes. Hard. The tank lurches violently. The commander points ahead. A narrow stretch of ground, almost invisible beneath fresh snow. A minefield. The lead vehicle had missed it by pure chance. Another meter, and your track might already be gone. Everyone exhales. Quietly. No celebration. Only relief. Luck, once again, had chosen your side. For today, the farther east you travel, the more you realize the Tiger is no longer the terrifying mystery it once was. The Soviets have studied it, observed it, recovered damaged examples, learned where it breaks, learned where to shoot, learned when to wait. Every month the battlefield becomes less forgiving. Every month the Tiger feels a little less invincible. Not because the machine has changed, because the enemy has. You begin noticing something else. The burned-out wrecks along the roadside. Some are Soviet, some German, some so damaged it's impossible to tell. But increasingly, you recognize the unmistakable silhouette of the Tiger. Turrets twisted sideways, tracks blown apart, hull scorched black. These weren't machines that had failed during training. They were the strongest tanks Germany possessed, and even they had been stopped. The battlefield doesn't care about reputations, only results. That night, the crew eats in silence. No jokes, no stories. The commander unfolds a worn map beneath a dim flashlight. Tomorrow's route crosses another stretch of open country. Perfect ground for enemy tanks. Perfect ground for ambushes. He traces the route with one gloved finger, then quietly folds the map away. No speeches, no promises, because by now, Everyone inside the Tiger understands the same uncomfortable truth. Being feared doesn't mean you're safe. Sometimes, it simply means every enemy gun on the battlefield is already looking for you. It begins with a sound you've never heard before. Not the roar of your own engine, not artillery, not machine gun fire. A sharp, violent, metallic crack. It lasts less than a second. Then the entire tank jerks sideways. Your helmet slams into the turret. Someone shouts. Someone else grabs the shell rack to keep from falling. For one terrifying moment, you have no idea whether you've been hit or whether the tank simply struck another obstacle. The commander doesn't hesitate. Keep moving. The driver forces the Tiger forward. The engine screams in protest. Tracks claw desperately at the frozen ground. Inside, every man waits for the second shot, because the first shell is rarely the one that destroys you. It's the one that tells everyone exactly where you are. Another impact. This one louder. The entire hull vibrates. Dust and flakes of rust drift down from the ceiling. A wrench falls somewhere behind you. The radio bursts into static. No one says a word. Every man is listening, trying to identify where the shot came from. Front? Left? Right? You can't tell. Inside a tank, direction disappears. Everything sounds as though it's happening everywhere at once. The commander finally spots it. 11 o'clock. The turret begins rotating. Slowly. Too slowly. The Tiger's massive gun is powerful, but its enormous weight means every movement takes precious seconds. Seconds the enemy is already using. The gunner peers through his sight. Searching. Searching. Then, there. You catch only a brief glimpse through your vision slit. A Soviet tank disappearing behind a line of trees. It fires, moves, disappears again, never remaining exposed long enough to become an easy target. The loader already has another shell in his hands. Nearly 20 kilograms of steel. He swings it toward the breach. His movements are practiced. Fast. Precise. He's done this hundreds of times. Even so, the confined space fights him every step. His elbow catches a bracket. The shell briefly slips. He recovers instantly. No one comments. Mistakes happen. Only surviving them matters. The breach slams shut. The commander gives the order. Fire. The explosion inside the turret is unlike anything you've experienced. The 88mm gun erupts with overwhelming force. Your ears ring despite every layer of protection. The recoil hurls the breach backward only inches from your body. The entire tank rocks. Smoke instantly fills the compartment. The smell of burnt propellant replaces diesel for a brief moment. Before the ventilation can clear it, the loader is already reaching for another shell. There is no time to admire the shot. Outside, you don't immediately know whether you hit anything. The battlefield disappears behind snow, smoke, and flying dirt. Only after several seconds does the commander speak. Target moving. Not destroyed. Still moving. Another round. The Tiger's greatest strength was always its gun. The 88mm cannon had earned a fearsome reputation for its accuracy and penetrating power, capable of knocking out many opposing tanks before they could effectively reply under favorable conditions. But reputation doesn't guarantee victory. Not when visibility is poor. Not when the enemy refuses to stay still. Not when several threats appear at once. A powerful gun is only useful if you can keep it pointed at the right target. The radio crackles again. Another Tiger reports enemy armor approaching from the flank. A second voice interrupts, then disappears entirely. No explanation. No farewell. Just static. Inside the compartment, no one acknowledges it, because everyone knows exactly what silence usually means. The commander suddenly shouts, "Infantry!" You look through the narrow periscope. At first, you see nothing. Then movement. Tiny figures darting between shell holes. Too close. Far too close. The main gun can't easily engage soldiers hugging the ground near the tank. The machine guns become your only defense. The driver pivots. The gunner shifts. Every member of the crew begins working simultaneously. Inside the Tiger, chaos somehow becomes routine. Another violent impact shakes the hull. This one feels different. Lower. Closer. The driver curses. The left track has taken damage. Not enough to stop you. Yet. But everyone understands what comes next. If another hit lands in the same place, you're finished. A motionless Tiger is exactly what the enemy wants. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours. Fire. Reload. Traverse. Fire again. Every action repeats until it becomes instinct. You stop thinking. Your body simply follows orders. Reach. Lift. Load. Brace. Repeat. The battlefield has reduced your world to a handful of movements performed over and over inside a steel box that grows hotter with every shot. Then, almost as suddenly as it began, the firing slows. The Soviet tanks withdraw behind the tree line. The artillery falls silent. The commander continues watching through his optics for another full minute before speaking. Cease fire. No one celebrates. No one believes it's over. On the Eastern Front, silence is often just another phase of the battle. Only now do you notice your hands. They're shaking, not from fear anymore, from exhaustion, from adrenaline finally leaving your body. Your ears still ring. Your throat burns from smoke. Your uniform is soaked with sweat despite the freezing weather outside. The loader leans back against the turret wall. The gunner quietly rubs his shoulder. The driver wipes grease from his face with a filthy sleeve. Everyone is still alive. Today, that feels like victory. But as the commander quietly checks the damaged track, you realize something unsettling. The Tiger survived. Barely. And tomorrow, you'll climb right back inside it. Because on the Eastern Front, surviving one battle never meant you'd survive the next. The shell that destroys a tank isn't always the one that kills its crew. Sometimes, the real danger arrives a heartbeat later. The commander once told you something that sounded impossible. You don't fear the impact. You fear what comes after it. At the time, you assumed he meant another enemy shell. Now, you understand. The Tiger rolls cautiously along a narrow dirt road. The battle has quieted. Smoke hangs over the forest like low clouds. No one speaks. Every crewman is busy listening to the machine. The engine, the suspension, the tracks. After yesterday's fight, every unfamiliar sound feels like a warning. Without warning, a deafening bang. Not outside. Inside, the tank lurches violently. Your ears ring. The lights flicker. Someone shouts. Another man curses. You instinctively duck. Your heart pounds so hard you can barely hear anything else. For a split second, you think you've been hit again. But the commander quickly looks around. Transmission, not enemy fire. A mechanical failure. Even so, the panic feels exactly the same. Because inside a Tiger, you often discover what happened only after your body has already prepared to die. Mechanical failures were a constant companion on the Eastern Front. The Tiger's immense weight placed tremendous strain on its transmission, final drives, and suspension. Even without enemy fire, these components demanded regular maintenance and could fail under the harsh conditions of mud, ice, long marches, and constant combat. Every kilometer asked something of the machine. Eventually, the machine answered back. The crew climbs out. The cold air immediately bites your face. Only then do you realize how hot the inside of the tank had become. Steam rises from your uniform. Your shirt clings to your back. The driver removes an inspection panel. Oil drips steadily onto the frozen ground. No one needs to say it aloud. This isn't good. While the mechanics work, the commander keeps scanning the horizon. The gunner watches the nearby tree line. Even a stationary Tiger remains a valuable target, especially a damaged one. Repairs aren't simply repairs. They're races. Can you fix the tank before someone finds it? Eventually, the engine coughs back to life. Relief washes over everyone. Briefly, because everyone knows another breakdown is only a matter of time. A few days later, your luck finally runs thin. The battle begins just after sunrise. Visibility is poor. Snow drifts across open ground. The tiger moves into position beside a ruined farmhouse. The commander studies the distant ridge. Everything seems quiet. Too quiet. Then, a violent metallic explosion slams into the front of the turret. The impact is unlike anything you've experienced. The entire tank rings like a church bell. The armor holds. Barely. No penetration. But flakes of steel burst from the inner surface of the armor. Tiny fragments. Traveling faster than bullets. One strikes the radio operator across the cheek. Another tears through the loader's glove. A third ricochets somewhere behind your head. You stare in disbelief. The shell never entered the tank. Yet people are already bleeding. The commander shouts over the ringing. Spall. You don't understand the word. Not yet. Then you see the tiny shards embedded in the steel walls. When a high-energy impact struck thick armor, it could sometimes knock fragments from the inside surface even without fully penetrating. Those razor-sharp pieces of steel, known as spall, could wound or kill crew members despite the armor remaining intact. The armor had protected you, mostly, but it had also become the source of your injuries. Before anyone can recover, another shell arrives. This time, the sound is different, sharper, deeper. The tank jerks violently. The engine stumbles. The commander immediately knows. Engine compartment. Smoke begins creeping through tiny gaps in the bulkhead, separating the fighting compartment from the engine. Not much, just enough. Enough to make everyone glance toward it. Enough to make every heartbeat suddenly feel louder. Inside a tank, smoke is terrifying. Not because you know what's burning, because you don't. Is it oil? Coolant? Electrical wiring? Fuel? You have only seconds to decide. And guessing wrong can cost everyone their lives. The driver reaches for the fire extinguisher. The loader grabs another. The commander orders the hatches opened. Fresh air rushes inside, along with freezing wind. Smoke pours upward. The crew works almost automatically. They've rehearsed this countless times. Because every tanker knows. Fire is one of the few enemies thick armor cannot stop. Fortunately, the smoke begins thinning. The fire never truly catches. Perhaps a damaged hose. Perhaps overheated oil. Perhaps something much smaller than your imagination feared. No one cares. The tank hasn't become an inferno. Today, that's enough. Later that evening, the commander quietly tells you about crews who weren't so fortunate. One penetrating shell, a ruptured fuel line, burning hydraulic fluid, stored ammunition beginning to cook off. Once flames reached the ammunition racks, survival depended almost entirely on how quickly the crew escaped. Sometimes they did. Sometimes they never managed to open the hatch in time. No one around the campfire asks for details. They've all seen enough burned-out tanks to imagine the rest. You lie awake that night staring at the dark silhouette of the tiger. From a distance, it still looks magnificent, powerful, untouchable, almost mythical. But now, you know what exists beneath those thick steel plates. Fuel, oil, ammunition, machinery under constant strain, and 5 ordinary men. The tiger wasn't just armored. It was packed with everything required to keep it fighting, which also meant it carried everything needed to become a furnace if fortune finally turned against it. Tomorrow, the enemy will keep firing. The engine will keep straining. The crew will keep climbing back inside. Because that's what soldiers do. Even when the machine protecting them sometimes feels just as dangerous as the battlefield outside. The cold doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in, first through your boots, then your gloves, then the tiny gap between your collar and your neck. You pull your coat tighter, stamp your feet, blow warm air into stiff hands. It helps. For a few minutes. Then the Eastern Front reminds you. It has far more patience than you do. The newspapers back home speak of heroic advances, brilliant victories, legendary machines conquering vast distances. They rarely mention the temperature. -20 degrees, -30, sometimes even colder. Numbers eventually lose their meaning. At a certain point, Cold stops being something you measure. It becomes something you survive. The tiger sits motionless beneath a pale morning sky. A thin layer of frost coats every surface. Even before climbing inside, you can see your breath drifting into the still air. The driver reaches the engine first. He doesn't try to start it immediately. He knows better. Metal contracts in the cold. Oil thickens. Batteries weaken. Everything mechanical resists movement. Rushing the process can destroy the engine before the day's march has even begun. So the crew waits. Someone lights a small heater beneath part of the engine compartment. Others inspect frozen track links. Every movement is slower than usual. Not because anyone is tired, because fingers simply refuse to work. You remove one glove for only a moment to tighten a bolt. The steel bites your skin instantly. It feels almost alive. Hungry. You pull your hand away before it has the chance to stick. Eventually, the driver climbs into his seat. He turns the starter. The engine coughs. Nothing. Again. Another cough. Silence. No one speaks. Everyone waits. A third attempt. This time, the Maybach finally stirs. Reluctantly, a cloud of thick gray smoke pours into the freezing morning air. The engine settles into its familiar growl. The entire crew exhales. Not because the battle has been won, because the day can finally begin. Winter punishes machines, but it punishes people even more. Your boots never seem completely dry. Snow melts during the day. Water seeps through seams in the leather. Then, when temperatures fall again, that moisture freezes. Every morning begins by forcing frozen boots back onto swollen feet. Every evening ends by wondering whether you'll still be able to feel your toes tomorrow. Inside the Tiger, the cold behaves strangely. When the engine has been running for hours, the compartment becomes almost unbearably hot. Sweat gathers beneath heavy uniforms. Faces redden. Gloves come off. Then the engine stops. Within minutes, the warmth disappears. The steel walls absorb every trace of heat. Condensation forms overhead. Tiny droplets cling to the ceiling. By morning, they've frozen solid. You wake beneath a roof covered in ice. Sleeping offers little relief. Most nights, there aren't enough blankets. There isn't enough space. Sometimes you sleep beneath the tank. Sometimes inside abandoned buildings with half-collapsed roofs. Sometimes sitting upright inside the vehicle itself. Every position becomes uncomfortable. After a few hours, your back aches constantly. Your shoulders never quite relax. Real sleep becomes a memory rather than a routine. The cold changes simple tasks. Loading ammunition becomes harder. Metal shells freeze against your gloves. Tools become difficult to grip. Even speaking requires effort. The freezing air steals moisture from your throat. Words come out as pale clouds before disappearing into the darkness. The crew talks less now, not because there's nothing to say, because conserving energy has become instinct. Food arrives when it can. Hot meals. Rarely. More often it's black bread hardened by the cold. Canned meat. Thin soup if the field kitchen manages to reach your position. Sometimes the soup freezes before you've finished eating it. You laugh the first time it happens. No one else does. They've already accepted it as normal. Water creates its own problems. Canteens freeze. Ice forms inside metal cups. Snow can be melted, but only if there's time. Only if there's fuel. Only if someone isn't already using that fire to repair something more important. You quickly learn the difference between being thirsty and having nothing you can actually drink. Then there are the illnesses. Persistent coughs. Fever. Chest infections. Frostbite. Hands split open from constant exposure. Lips crack until they bleed. Small cuts refuse to heal. Every crew carries someone who's clearly sick. That person keeps working anyway. Because replacement crews aren't waiting just over the next hill. If you stop, someone else has to carry your load. The commander notices you rubbing your hands together. He smiles faintly. The Russians aren't trying to survive winter. They've learned to live with it. You look toward the distant tree line. Soviet soldiers continue moving. Ski patrols glide silently across the snow. Supply sleds appear where trucks cannot. Their uniforms blend into the white landscape. The weather that cripples your advance is often the same weather, protecting theirs. The Eastern Front doesn't belong to either army, but one side understands it better. Days begin blending together. Snow, engine, march, repair, eat, sleep, repeat. You stop remembering dates. The calendar loses its purpose. Instead, you remember battles, villages, frozen rivers, broken bridges. The war measures time differently now. One evening, the crew gathers around a small stove inside a damaged farmhouse. No one speaks for several minutes. You simply stare into the flames, watching bits of damp which struggle to burn. The silence isn't uncomfortable anymore. It's comforting. Out here, silence usually means no one's shooting. That alone feels like a gift. As you prepare to sleep, the commander quietly says something almost to himself. The cold doesn't kill quickly. It convinces you to give up. You think about that for a long time. Because he's right. A shell arrives in an instant. Winter works slowly, patiently. Every frozen morning, every sleepless night, every aching joint, every meal that isn't enough. Until one day, you wake up and realize the battlefield hasn't defeated you. It has simply worn pieces of you away. One day at a time. Tomorrow, the tiger will move again. The engine will roar. The snow will fall. And somewhere beyond the white horizon, another battle will be waiting. At first, you don't realize anything has changed. The tiger still rolls east to west. The engine still roars. The gun is still loaded. The crew still follows the same routine. But something feels different. The roads are busier. Not with reinforcements. With men heading the opposite direction. Horse-drawn wagons creak past your position. Field kitchens. Medical trucks. Repair vehicles. Long columns of exhausted infantry. Some carry rifles. Others carry only blankets. Many carry wounded friends. No one looks at your tiger with admiration anymore. They simply step aside and continue walking west. The commander studies the passing columns. In silence. Finally, he folds his map. We're pulling back. No speeches. No dramatic announcement. Just 3 words. The war has changed direction. Retreat sounds simple. Turn around. Drive away. But nothing on the Eastern Front is simple. Especially not when your vehicle weighs nearly 70 tons. Every bridge becomes a gamble. Can it still support the tiger? Has enemy artillery already weakened it? Will it still be standing by the time you arrive? The engineers often inspect crossings before allowing the heavy tanks through. Sometimes they wave you forward. Sometimes they shake their heads. Too dangerous. Too weak. The crew climbs back aboard. Another detour. Another delay. Another chance for Soviet aircraft to discover the column. Fuel becomes even more precious now. The Tiger has always consumed astonishing amounts of it. But during the retreat, fuel arrives less often. Supply lines stretch farther. Railways are bombed. Convoys disappear. Barrels become more valuable than shells. One evening, the driver quietly counts what remains. The commander nods. We can reach the next village. He doesn't sound certain. Soon, the crew begins making decisions that would have seemed impossible only months earlier. The engine stays off whenever possible. Idling wastes fuel. Long detours are avoided. Unnecessary movement stops altogether. Every liter saved today might mean escaping tomorrow. The roads themselves become another enemy. Thousands of vehicles now share the same narrow routes westward. Trucks bog down in mud. Horse carts overturn. Abandoned artillery pieces line the roadside. The Tiger crawls forward at walking pace. Sometimes slower. You spend more time waiting, then driving. Then the weather changes. The frozen ground begins to soften. Snow melts into water. Water becomes mud. The famous Rasputitsa has returned. The roads dissolve beneath your tracks. What looked like solid earth yesterday swallows half the vehicle today. The driver eases onto what appears to be a firm stretch of road. Without warning, the Tiger sinks. Only slightly at first, then deeper. The engine growls. Tracks spin. Mud sprays against the hull. But the tank barely moves. Everyone climbs out immediately, not because they want to, because 70 tons doesn't pull itself free. The crew spends hours working. Logs beneath the tracks, tow cables, shovels. Mud freezes against your boots, then melts again. Every minute feels wasted. Every minute increases the chance that Soviet scouts are watching from nearby woods. The commander never stops scanning the tree line. A stranded tiger is an invitation. Eventually, another German recovery vehicle arrives. Together, both crews strain against heavy steel cables. Engines roar. Tracks bite. Mud flies. For a terrifying moment, nothing happens. Then, slowly, the tiger begins climbing free. No cheering, only exhausted relief. Everyone understands how close they'd come to abandoning the tank, because that possibility now hangs over every mission. Earlier in the war, losing a tiger in battle felt almost unthinkable. Now, crews quietly discuss something they once refused to imagine: destroying their own vehicle. The commander explains it one evening beside a dying fire. If we can't move it, we can't leave it. Not intact. A disabled tiger left behind could be examined, recovered, even turned against its former owners. If escape became impossible, the crew carried demolition charges for exactly that reason. The thought sits heavily in your mind. Months spent maintaining this machine, fighting inside it, trusting it, only to destroy it yourselves. You begin noticing burned-out tigers along the retreat routes. Some were knocked out in battle. Others show no obvious combat damage. Their hatches stand open, their hulls blackened by deliberate explosions. Not destroyed by the enemy, destroyed by their own crews. It feels strangely tragic, like watching someone burn down their own home simply to keep another person from living inside it. The Soviet army grows bolder. Their aircraft appear more often. Artillery follows more closely. Reconnaissance units seem to know where German columns will appear before they arrive. The retreat is no longer orderly. It's becoming a race, not toward victory, toward survival. One afternoon, your tiger reaches another crossroads. A military policeman redirects every vehicle. The eastern road is cut. Another detour, another bridge, another uncertain route. The commander unfolds the map again. You notice there are fewer places marked as friendly now. The front isn't just moving, it's collapsing. That night, you sit atop the tiger and look west. The sun sinks behind distant forests. For the first time since arriving on the Eastern Front, you realize you're no longer thinking about winning the war. Neither is anyone else. The conversations have changed. No one asks how far you'll advance. They ask whether you'll reach the next town before the roads disappear, whether enough fuel will arrive, whether the bridge ahead still exists. Victory has quietly slipped out of the discussion. Survival has taken its place. Tomorrow, the retreat continues. The tiger will keep moving if it can. If it can't, the crew may face the hardest decision of the entire war. Every tiger crew has the conversation. No one wants to. No one brings it up willingly. But sooner or later, someone quietly asks the question: if she stops, what then? No one answers immediately, because everyone already knows. For months, the tiger has been more than a machine. You've slept beside it, repaired it in blizzards, eaten meals leaning against its armor, trusted it to stop shells that would have killed you in the open. You know every unusual vibration, every stubborn hatch, every squeak in the suspension. It no longer feels like equipment. It feels almost alive. The order comes just after dawn. The retreat must continue. The Soviet advance is moving faster than expected. Every available vehicle is heading west. Your tiger joins the column. The engine sounds rough. The driver notices it immediately. He doesn't say anything. He simply keeps listening. The road narrows into a forest track. Heavy rain from the previous day has turned the ground into thick brown mud. The tiger pushes forward anyway. Its tracks churn the earth into deep ruts. Trees brush against the turret. Branches scrape loudly across the armor. No one likes forests. Visibility disappears. Every shadow could conceal an ambush. Then, It happens. A grinding noise. Deep. Violent. Unlike anything you've heard before. The driver immediately kills the throttle. The Tiger rolls another few meters. Before stopping completely. Silence. The driver tries reverse. Nothing. First gear. Nothing. The engine revs. The hull shudders. The tracks barely twitch. Another horrible metallic grinding echoes beneath the floor. Then, nothing at all. Everyone climbs out. No one speaks. The driver kneels beside the left final drive. He doesn't need long. When he finally stands, his expression says everything. It's gone. One of the final drives has failed. A catastrophic breakdown. The Tiger isn't moving again. Not today. Possibly. Not ever. The commander studies the map. Recovery vehicles? Too far away. Enough time to wait. No. Enemy reconnaissance has already been reported nearby. Fuel to tow 70 tons? Almost certainly not. Every option disappears one after another, until only one remains. The commander quietly removes his gloves, looks back at the tank, then says the words no Tiger crew ever wants to hear. We abandon her. No one moves. For several seconds, everyone simply stares at the enormous machine. It somehow feels impossible. A tank that survived artillery, air attacks, Russian winters, hundreds of kilometers of combat, now defeated by its own transmission. The driver walks over to the hull, places one hand against the cold steel, almost absent-mindedly, like saying goodbye to an old friend. No one laughs, because everyone understands exactly why he did it. The demolition charges come out. Small, ordinary-looking. Nothing about them suggests they are capable of destroying one of the most famous tanks ever built. The crew places them carefully inside the fighting compartment, near critical components. The gun breech, the optics, the transmission, anything the enemy might recover. Everything must be ruined. Everything. You remove what you can carry. Maps, personal photographs, letters from home, a spare pair of gloves, the commander's binoculars, a kettle blackened from months of use. It's strange what suddenly feels valuable. No one bothers taking the heavy equipment. There isn't room. Soon. There won't be time. The commander takes one final look inside. Empty seats. Spent shell casings beneath the floor. The smell of oil that has soaked permanently into the steel. Scratches where helmets struck the roof countless times. Tiny dents from flying fragments. Months of survival, etched into every surface. He quietly closes the hatch. For the last time, everyone walks away. Only 50 meters. The commander checks that the others are behind cover. Then, he pulls the detonator. The explosion isn't enormous. Just a heavy, deep thud. The turret shakes violently. Smoke pours through shattered hatches. Flames begin licking from the engine deck. Within seconds, the Tiger is burning. Not because the enemy destroyed it, because its own crew refused to leave it behind. You stand silently watching. The heat reaches you even from a distance. Black smoke climbs into the gray sky. The steel you've trusted for so many months begins twisting beneath the flames. The commander never looks away. Neither does anyone else. There are no speeches, no ceremony, only silence. Sometimes, losing a machine hurts because of what it represents. Not victory, not power, survival. The march west begins on foot. At first, it feels wrong. Your legs almost expect the vibration of the engine beneath them. The familiar roar is gone. Now, all you hear are boots. Hundreds of boots. Thousands, perhaps. Entire columns of soldiers moving west through forests and muddy roads. Tank crews, infantry, mechanics, drivers, all walking together. The machines that once carried them, gone. Only now do you fully understand something. The Tiger never truly protected you. It only delayed the moment when you had to face the Eastern Front without it. Tomorrow, there will be no armor above your head. No 88mm gun beside you. No thick steel walls. Only your rifle, your exhausted comrades, and the endless road stretching west. The war isn't over. It has simply become much more personal. For the first time in months, the world feels enormous. Inside the tiger, your universe had been measured in steel walls, a narrow vision slit, the constant vibration beneath your boots, the familiar smell of oil and diesel. Now, there's nothing between you and the Eastern Front. No armor, no engine, no thick plates of steel to absorb the next shell. Just open sky, frozen fields, and the long road west. The first few kilometers feel strangely quiet. Your ears are still expecting the engine. Your feet almost expect the rhythmic rocking of the tracks. Instead, all you hear are boots. Thousands of them. Boots sinking into mud, crunching across frozen ground, splashing through icy puddles. An entire army. Walking. You quickly realize how spoiled the tank crew had become. Not comfortable. Never comfortable. But protected. The tiger carried your ammunition, your food, your spare clothing, your tools. Now, everything you own hangs from your shoulders. Every kilogram feels heavier with each passing hour. The rifle digs into your back. The straps cut into your shoulders. Even your helmet seems to gain weight. No one marches in perfect formation anymore. The retreat has dissolved into long columns stretching for kilometers. Tank crews, engineers, medical units, horse carts, trucks running on their last fuel, civilian wagons piled high with blankets and children. Everyone shares the same road. Everyone is heading west. No one asks who belongs where. The commander walks beside you now, not above you inside the turret, not separated by armor. Just another tired man carrying a rifle. Without the tiger, rank still matters. But the machine that once separated officers from crew has disappeared. Everyone now sleeps under the same sky. Everyone now gets equally wet, equally cold, equally tired. The weather refuses to cooperate. Rain falls throughout the afternoon. Not heavy, just constant. Enough to soak uniforms. Enough to turn every dirt road into thick brown clay. Your boots become coated in mud. Each step feels as though someone is pulling backward on your legs. The road itself seems determined to stop you. You begin understanding why infantrymen always looked exhausted. A tank crew fought battles. An infantryman fought the road itself. Every day, every kilometer. Without rest. Without shelter. Night finally arrives. There are no tents. No buildings nearby. Only a patch of woodland offering some protection from the wind. The men gather fallen branches. Someone manages to light a small fire. Barely. The wood is damp. Smoke pours upward while the flames struggle to survive. You sit close enough to feel warmth on one side of your body. The other side remains freezing. No one complains. This is luxury now. The evening meal consists of black bread, a small piece of sausage, thin soup passed between several men. No one receives enough. Everyone pretends they aren't still hungry afterward. You eat slowly anyway, trying to convince your stomach the meal lasted longer than it actually did. As darkness deepens, stories begin quietly circulating around the fire. Not heroic stories. No tales of glorious victories. Instead, people talk about home. One mechanic remembers fishing with his father before the war. Another describes the smell of fresh bread from a bakery in Munich. Someone else talks about his daughter learning to walk. No one interrupts. No one exaggerates. Home has become everyone's favorite subject, because it's the only place none of you have seen in years. Later, the commander quietly unfolds a map. He studies it beneath a flashlight whose batteries are almost dead. The front line shifts so often now that yesterday's map already feels outdated. Roads marked as safe may already belong to the enemy. Villages still carrying German names may already have fallen. Every decision becomes an educated guess. Before sunrise, the column moves again. No breakfast, no ceremony, just another day. The march continues. Your legs ache before the first kilometer has passed. Blisters begin forming beneath your heels. Shoulders burn beneath heavy straps. You understand something uncomfortable. Walking is easier than fighting. But doing it every day slowly breaks a man in ways battle often doesn't. Around midday, the sound arrives. Aircraft. Everyone immediately looks skyward. The column scatters without orders. Instinct has replaced discipline. Men dive into roadside ditches. Horse teams bolt in panic. Drivers abandon trucks. You throw yourself behind a fallen tree. Seconds later, the fighter bombers appear overhead. Their engines scream across the valley. Machine gun fire tears through the road. Bullets throw dirt into the air. A truck erupts into flames. Horses collapse where they stand. The attack lasts less than 2 minutes. Then, it's over. The aircraft disappear into the clouds, leaving silence behind. Slowly, people emerge from the ditches. Someone helps a wounded driver stand. Another gathers frightened horses. The column reforms almost automatically. No speeches, no shouting, just quiet determination. You realize this has happened so many times that everyone already knows exactly what to do. As evening approaches, the commander slows his pace. He glances behind. Far to the east, dark smoke rises above the forests. Somewhere back there, the remains of your tiger have long since cooled. Tomorrow, Soviet soldiers may discover the burned-out wreck. Perhaps they'll wonder about the men who abandoned it. Perhaps they won't. The battlefield rarely has time for curiosity. You continue walking, step after step. The rhythm becomes almost hypnotic. Boot, mud, boot, mud. Eventually, the march stops feeling like movement. It simply becomes life. You no longer think about reaching home, or even reaching the next town. You think only about the next step, then the one after that. Because sometimes, survival isn't achieved through courage or brilliant strategy. Sometimes, it's achieved by refusing to stop walking. Winter returns, not with fanfare, not with the dramatic blizzard you imagined months ago. It simply arrives one morning and refuses to leave. The puddles you crossed yesterday are solid ice. The trees stand bare beneath a gray sky. Your breath hangs in the air once more. The Eastern Front has entered another season, and this time, it feels older. So do you. Last winter, you believed the war could still be won. There had been setbacks, hard battles, long retreats, but somewhere beneath the exhaustion, hope still survived. This winter feels different. The officers no longer speak about victory. They speak about holding, delaying, buying time. Even the language of the war has changed. The column passes through another ruined village. Months ago, families lived here. Children played in the streets. Smoke rose from chimneys. Now, doors hang open. Windows are shattered. The only movement comes from snow blowing through empty houses. War doesn't always destroy cities in explosions. Sometimes, it simply empties them. The men barely notice anymore. A burned church. Another collapsed bridge. An abandoned tractor frozen beside the road. Scenes that once demanded attention have become ordinary. You wonder whether that's the saddest part of all. Not the destruction, getting used to it. Food grows scarcer. Breakfast is half a slice of black bread. Lunch doesn't exist. Dinner depends entirely on whether the supply wagons arrive. Often, they don't. The bread becomes thinner, the soup more watery. The meat disappears altogether. No one complains. Complaining burns energy. Energy now feels more valuable than food itself. One evening, a young replacement soldier quietly asks when the next supply convoy is expected. Several older men exchange tired glances. No one answers. Not because they're being cruel, because no one actually knows. The front is moving too quickly. Rail lines are broken. Roads are overcrowded. Sometimes supplies arrive. Sometimes they vanish somewhere behind the front forever. The uniforms are beginning to fail. Boots all separate from leather. Buttons disappear. Gloves wear through at the fingertips. Coats grow thinner after months of constant use. You stitch small tears with thread pulled from old blankets. Every repair feels temporary. Everything feels temporary now. Illness spreads quietly through the column. Persistent coughs echo through the camps at night. Fevers linger. Faces grow thinner. One soldier walks with a limp that never seems to improve. Another wraps frost-bitten fingers in strips of cloth. The medic does what he can. There simply isn't enough medicine for everyone. Sometimes, rest would solve the problem. But rest has become a luxury no one can afford. The commander himself looks different now. His uniform hangs more loosely than it once did. The lines around his eyes seem deeper. His beard grows unevenly between hurried shaves. He still studies every map carefully, still gives calm orders, still walks at the front of the group. But even he can't hide the weight of another year at war. Leadership doesn't make a man immune to exhaustion. It simply teaches him to carry it quietly. One afternoon, the column pauses beside a frozen river. The engineers inspect the ice. Too thin. The crossing will have to wait. Hundreds of men stand silently along the bank. No one has anywhere else to go. No one has enough firewood to stay warm. So they wait, watching the slow current beneath the ice. Watching daylight disappear a little earlier than yesterday. Waiting has become part of the routine. That evening, you overhear two veterans speaking in low voices. They aren't discussing battles, or politics, or strategy. They're talking about what they'll do if they survive. One wants to rebuild his father's farm. The other dreams of opening a bicycle repair shop. Simple things. Ordinary things. A few years ago, those dreams might have sounded unremarkable. Now, they sound extraordinary. Because they require a future. You realize something. The men around you rarely speak about medals anymore, or promotions, or famous victories. They speak about kitchens, warm beds, fresh bread, seeing their mothers again, watching children grow up. The war has stripped away almost every ambition except one. Going home alive. Late that night, snow begins falling again. Soft, almost peaceful. It settles across abandoned trucks, broken wagons, discarded helmets beside the road. Within an hour, the battlefield looks untouched, as though none of it ever happened. Nature has a remarkable ability to hide humanity's worst decisions beneath a clean layer of white. Only those who were here know what lies underneath. Before dawn, the commander quietly wakes everyone. Time to move. Another road. Another village. Another uncertain day. As you shoulder your pack, you notice something unexpected. The fear that once followed every step has changed. It hasn't disappeared. It's simply been replaced. You're no longer afraid of dying in battle. You're afraid of surviving, only to lose yourself before the war ends. Because war doesn't only destroy bodies. It slowly reshapes the people who endure it. One frozen morning at a time. Tomorrow, the retreat will continue. But somewhere beyond these forests, the war itself is entering its final chapter. And so, perhaps, are you? You stop counting the days. Not because they no longer matter. Because the calendar has lost its meaning. Winter has become spring. Spring has become another season of retreat. The villages all blur together. The forests look the same. The roads stretch endlessly west. Only one thing keeps changing. The front gets closer. The rumors arrive before the official orders. Cities have fallen. Entire armies have disappeared. Rail lines no longer exist. Fuel depots have been abandoned. Every day someone claims the war will be over within weeks. Every day someone else insists victory is still possible. You stop believing either. Rumors are as common as mud. Neither fills an empty stomach. The commander receives fresh orders. The paper is damp from rain before he even unfolds it. The mission is simple. Delay the Soviet advance. Cover the withdrawal of civilians and other units. Hold the crossroads as long as possible. Then retreat. If retreat remains possible. No one comments. Everyone has carried out orders like these before. Only now, they feel heavier. There are no tigers left in your unit. No great armored beasts. No roaring Maybach engines. Only scattered trucks, horse carts, and weary infantry carrying everything they own on tired shoulders. The war has become strangely quiet. Not because fewer people are fighting, because so much has already been lost. You reach the crossroads before dawn. A few hastily dug foxholes overlook an open field. Beyond it, a narrow road disappears into rolling hills. The commander studies the horizon through his binoculars. Nothing yet. Just mist. Birdsong. For a brief moment. The countryside almost looks peaceful. Then artillery begins. The first shells land far behind your position. Walking closer. Each explosion throws frozen earth into the air. The familiar rhythm returns. Whistle. Impact. Silence. Repeat. You haven't heard it in weeks. Yet your body remembers immediately. You instinctively flatten against the earth. Heart racing. Hands gripping your rifle. Some habits never leave. Soon, the first Soviet scouts appear. Small figures moving cautiously between hedgerows. Not charging. Observing. Testing. Looking for weakness. You realize they're just as tired as you are. Their uniforms are worn. Their faces hollow. The battlefield has exhausted both armies. It has simply exhausted them in different directions. The commander waits. No unnecessary firing. Every bullet matters now. Only when the scouts move closer does the order finally come. A short burst. The crack of rifles echoes across the valley. The Soviet soldiers disappear back into cover. Silence returns. Briefly, no cheering follows. No one believes the fight is finished. By midday, the real attack begins. Artillery pounds the crossroads. Mortars fall among the trees. Machine gun fire sweeps the road. The air fills with smoke and splintered wood. You move from one shallow trench to another. The battlefield feels strangely familiar. Not because it's the same place. Because every battlefield eventually becomes identical. Noise. Confusion. Mud. Fear. Hours pass. The defenders slowly withdraw from one position to the next. Exactly as ordered. No glorious last stand. No dramatic speeches. Simply buying time. 1 hour. Then another. Long enough for more wagons. More ambulances. More frightened civilians to continue west. Sometimes, winning isn't possible. Only delaying defeat. Late in the afternoon, the commander receives the signal. Retreat. Immediately. The crossroads has served its purpose. Staying longer would accomplish nothing. He nods. No hesitation. The surviving men begin pulling back through the forest. No one runs. Running draws attention. Experience has taught everyone that. As evening falls, you glance back one last time. The crossroads has disappeared beneath smoke. Soon, the Soviet army will occupy it. Tomorrow, someone else will defend another road farther west. The front no longer feels like a line. It feels like a tide, and no one can stop the tide forever. That night, the column sleeps inside the shell of an abandoned factory. Rain taps gently against the broken roof. The commander sits alone near a shattered window. You quietly join him. Neither of you speaks for several minutes. Finally, he says something you've never heard from him before. I used to think surviving battles made us lucky. He watches the rain outside. Now I think surviving the war might be the hardest part. You don't answer. There isn't one. Because you understand exactly what he means. The war has already taken friends, homes, years of your life. If peace finally comes, who exactly returns home? The man who left? Or someone entirely different? Before dawn, the march begins once again. Only now, everyone can feel it. The end is somewhere ahead. No one knows exactly when, or what it will look like. But the war that once seemed endless is finally running out of road. The war doesn't end all at once. It unravels, like an old coat whose seams have finally given way. One thread, then another, until nothing is left holding it together. The roads west have become rivers of people. Soldiers, nurses, mechanics, government workers, families pushing handcarts piled with everything they couldn't bear to leave behind. Old men, young children, women carrying infants wrapped in blankets far too thin for the cold. No one speaks much anymore. Everyone walks with the same expression. Exhausted. The sound of artillery never truly disappears. It simply grows closer. Every day, every night. Sometimes you wake convinced the guns are just beyond the next hill. Sometimes they are. The commander studies another map, then quietly folds it without saying a word. There are almost no friendly positions left to mark. Entire regions have vanished from German control in only a matter of weeks. The lines that once stretched confidently across Europe have collapsed into scattered pockets of resistance. The map no longer tells you where victory might be, only where the next road still remains open. You notice something strange. The younger soldiers still ask questions. Where are we going? When do we counterattack? When will reinforcements arrive? The older veterans no longer ask. Experience has already answered those questions. One afternoon, your column passes another group of retreating soldiers. No trucks, no artillery, no officers shouting orders. Just tired men carrying rifles across their shoulders. One of them notices the tank crew insignia on your uniform. Were you in Tigers? You nod. He smiles sadly. I thought they'd save us. Then he continues walking. Those words stay with you for the rest of the day. Because once, you believed exactly the same thing. The skies belong almost entirely to the Allies now. Whenever aircraft appear, the roads empty within seconds. Columns scatter into forests. Men disappear beneath bridges. Vehicles are hidden beneath trees. Everyone has learned the same lesson. Being seen can be as dangerous as being shot. Supplies have almost vanished. Breakfast is whatever remains from yesterday. Dinner is whatever someone manages to find today. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it isn't. One evening, the commander quietly divides a single loaf of bread among 7 men. Each piece is barely larger than your palm. No one complains. Someone even jokes that it's the biggest meal he's had all week. Everyone laughs. Not because it's funny, because laughter still reminds you that you're human. That night, rain falls steadily against the roof of an abandoned barn. The men lie silently beneath damp blankets. Sleep refuses to come. Some stare into darkness. Others quietly polish rifles they'll probably never fire again. One soldier removes a folded photograph from his pocket. He studies it beneath a flashlight for several minutes, then carefully folds it away. You don't ask whose face is in the picture. Everyone has someone they're trying to return to. Morning brings another surprise. No artillery, no aircraft, just silence. Real silence. It feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. After years of constant noise, peace itself seems suspicious. The commander receives another message. Short, simple. Continue withdrawing. Avoid unnecessary engagement. Preserve your men. You notice the wording immediately. Not preserve territory. Not preserve equipment. Preserve your men. For the first time, the soldiers themselves have become more valuable than the ground beneath their boots. You begin passing groups of civilians traveling east and west simultaneously. Some flee the advancing front. Others search desperately for missing relatives. A little girl clutches a stuffed rabbit, missing one ear. An elderly man pushes a bicycle loaded with blankets. A mother carries a sleeping child while looking constantly over her shoulder. War has erased the distinction between battlefield and home. Everyone is caught inside it now. One evening, you climb a small hill overlooking the countryside. The setting sun paints the fields in soft shades of orange and gold. For a few moments, it's beautiful. So beautiful that it almost feels impossible this same land has witnessed so much suffering. The commander quietly joins you. Neither of you speaks. Finally, he says, I've forgotten what silence sounded like before the war. You listen. Wind moving through the grass. Birds somewhere in the distance. No engines. No shell fire. No shouting. Only nature, continuing as though none of this ever happened. As darkness falls, you realize something unexpected. You're no longer afraid of the next battle. You're afraid of what comes after the last one. You've spent years following orders. Marching. Repairing. Surviving. What happens when all of that suddenly stops? Can someone simply decide to become ordinary again? Or does war remain with them, long after the shooting ends? Tomorrow, the answer may finally arrive. Because somewhere ahead, governments are collapsing, cities are surrendering, and the war that has shaped every moment of your life is only days away from becoming history. You don't hear the war end. At least, not at first. There is no great trumpet, No dramatic announcement echoing across the countryside. No single moment when every rifle falls silent together. Instead, the fighting simply begins to fade. One battery of artillery stops firing. Then another. Machine guns become less frequent. The sky grows quieter, almost cautiously, as though the world itself isn't quite convinced it's finally over. The rumors spread faster than official orders. Berlin has fallen. The Führer is dead. They've surrendered. Every hour someone claims to know the truth. Every hour someone else insists the fighting will continue. After years of false hope, no one wants to believe good news too quickly. Hope has become something dangerous. Then, the commander gathers everyone together. There are only a handful of men left from the original crew. The driver, the gunner, the loader, yourself, several others you've marched beside during the retreat. He unfolds a crumpled piece of paper. His hands are steady. His voice, less so. The war. He pauses, looking at each face. Is over. No cheers. No applause. Just silence. You wait. Surely there should be more. An explanation. Another order. Something. Instead, the commander folds the paper again, looks out across the empty road, and quietly says, "Go home." The words sound strangely unfamiliar. Home. You haven't heard anyone use that word seriously in years. Not as a memory, not as a dream, as a destination. For a moment, none of you move. After so many years of following orders, being told, simply to leave feels almost impossible to understand. Someone finally laughs. A short, uncertain laugh. Another man wipes his eyes before pretending he isn't crying. The driver removes his helmet. He stares at it for several seconds, then quietly places it on the ground. You realize he isn't setting down the helmet. He's setting down the war. The road ahead is still crowded, but something has changed. The soldiers walking beside you no longer glance constantly toward the horizon. No one dives into ditches when distant engines echo across the valley. People still move cautiously. Habit doesn't disappear overnight. But for the first time, fear no longer controls every step. The countryside looks exactly as it did yesterday. The same forests, the same rivers, the same ruined villages. Only your understanding has changed. Yesterday, every bridge represented another military objective. Today, it's simply a bridge. Yesterday, every distant figure might have been an enemy. Today, it might just be another tired man trying to find his family. The landscape hasn't changed. The meaning of it has. Days pass. The journey home begins. Mostly on foot, sometimes aboard overcrowded trucks, occasionally riding in wagons beside civilians who have lost almost everything. The conversations slowly return. People begin introducing themselves again, not by rank, by name. One mechanic tells you he repaired tractors before the war. Another admits he wants nothing more than to never see another engine for the rest of his life. Someone else quietly wonders whether his parents are still alive. No one has easy answers anymore. As towns begin to reappear, the destruction becomes harder to ignore. Entire streets reduced to broken brick. Factories standing roofless against gray skies. Railway stations filled with people searching handwritten lists of names. Children asking strangers whether they've seen their fathers. Victory and defeat seem strangely meaningless here. Everyone has lost something. One afternoon, you pass the burned-out shell of a Tiger tank beside the road. Its turret sits crooked. The tracks have long since rusted into the earth. Wild grass has already begun growing around the hull. You stop walking, just for a moment. The others continue ahead. The commander notices. He waits beside you. Neither of you speaks. Finally, he says, "She'll stay here longer than we will." You nod. The machine that once seemed immortal already belongs to history. You think back to the first day you climbed inside. How enormous it looked. How invincible. How impossible it seemed that anything could ever destroy it. Now, it's just steel. Cold. Silent. Empty. The legends survived. The men inside them often didn't. Eventually, the road forks. The commander stops. Each direction leads toward a different hometown, different future, different life. He shakes each man's hand. No speeches, no medals, no promises to meet again, just quiet gratitude. Some friendships don't require many words, especially after everything you've endured together. As you continue alone, you notice the birds. You hadn't paid attention to them in years. They sing exactly as they always have, completely indifferent to armies, to borders, to victories, to defeats. Nature never enlisted. It simply waited, patiently, for people to stop fighting. Then, at last, your hometown appears in the distance, smaller than you remember. The church steeple, the old bridge, the row of familiar rooftops. Your pace slows, not because you're tired, because suddenly, you're unsure. You've spent years imagining this moment. Now that it's here, you wonder whether the town will recognize you, whether you'll recognize yourself. You stop at the edge of the road, take one deep breath, and look back, far beyond the hills, beyond the forests, beyond the countless roads you've marched, lies the Eastern Front, a place where ordinary men climbed into extraordinary machines, where freezing winters and endless mud claimed almost as many lives as bullets, where fear became routine, where survival became victory. You arrived believing the tiger made you invincible. You leave understanding something very different. No machine, no matter how powerful, can protect a person from war itself. Only luck, the people beside you, and the stubborn determination to keep taking one more step, then another, until one day, the guns finally fall silent, and you discover, against every expectation, that you're still here. The war is over. Your story, at last, can begin again. Years pass, then decades. The roads you once marched become ordinary highways. The shell holes fill with grass. Forests reclaim abandoned trenches. Villages rebuild. Children play in fields where armies once fought. The Eastern Front slowly disappears beneath the quiet persistence of time. One summer morning, a farmer notices something unusual while plowing his field. The earth catches the blade. Steel, rust-covered, impossibly thick. Workers dig carefully, hour after hour. Slowly, the shape begins to emerge. A road wheel, then a section of track, then the unmistakable outline of a Tiger tank, buried for years beneath mud and snow, hidden by nature, waiting. The machine no longer inspires fear. Its gun is silent, its engine frozen forever. Birds perch where commanders once scanned the horizon. Wildflowers grow between broken track links. Rain washes gently across armor that once shrugged off shells. The battlefield has reclaimed one of history's most famous weapons. Visitors eventually arrive. Historians, engineers, photographers. Some marvel at the thickness of the armor. Others study the engineering. Children stand beside the enormous tracks and wonder how something so massive ever moved. Everyone sees the machine. Few imagine the people who lived inside it. They don't hear the constant roar of the Maybach engine. They don't smell diesel, burn oil, and cordite trapped inside a steel compartment. They don't feel the bruises from striking the turret roof, or the exhaustion of lifting shell after shell, or the terror of waiting for the next impact. Museums preserve steel. Memories are harder to keep. Photographs survive. Black and white faces. Young men standing proudly beside freshly painted tigers. Most are smiling. Many haven't begun shaving every day. Some are barely adults. The camera captures confidence. It cannot capture what came afterward. The winters, the retreats, the friends who never returned. History often remembers machines. The Tiger, the T-34, the Sherman. The names become famous. The people inside them, less so. Yet machines never chose where to fight. Machines never missed their families. Machines never lay awake wondering whether they would survive until morning. Only people did. Today, the Tiger remains one of the most recognizable tanks ever built. Its thick armor, its powerful 88mm gun, its unmistakable silhouette. Engineers still admire its design. Historians still debate its strengths and weaknesses. Enthusiasts travel across the world just to see the few surviving examples. They deserve to be remembered, but not because they were invincible, because they remind us how extraordinary human ingenuity can become during extraordinary times, and how devastating its consequences can be. The Eastern Front claimed millions of lives. Soldiers, civilians, families caught between advancing armies. It was one of the largest and deadliest theaters of the Second World War. No single tank, no single battle can fully explain its scale, but sometimes one machine can help us understand the people who endured it. Perhaps that's the real story of the Tiger. Not that it was the strongest, not that it inspired fear, not that it became a legend, but that inside every one of those steel giants were ordinary men, cold, hungry, exhausted, doing everything they could to survive another day, just like the soldiers on every other side of the war. If there's anything worth carrying forward from their story, it is an admiration for war, its appreciation for peace. Because peace rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly, in birdsong returning to silent forests, in children playing where guns once fired, in bridges rebuilt instead of destroyed, in families finally sitting together around a dinner table again. The moments people during wartime dreamed about, while wondering if they'd ever see them. The Tiger has long since fallen silent. Its engine will never roar again. Its tracks will never cross another frozen field. But the lessons left behind, about courage, endurance, loss, and the terrible cost of war, still echo across history. If we remember the people as carefully as we remember the machines, then perhaps their stories continue to serve a purpose, not to glorify conflict, but to remind us why it should never be repeated.